one just because I wanted to. And then while those are still a bit wet, I'm going to take some brown, like a dark brown color. And I'm going to go and drop that in the center of each flower. And because they're still wet, they will bleed a little bit, but not a crazy amount. So that one's not bleeding very much. This one probably won't bleed very much either because it dried pretty fast. But these ones are going to bleed because I just painted them. And I honestly like how that looks when they bleed. I think that's pretty. Some people hate that, but I like it. And then I'm going to take a green. And we'll talk about this later, but the trick to making your greens look natural, most paints straight out of a palette don't look green, or don't look very natural. So I rarely ever use like a green straight from my palette. For instance, I never ever really use either of these two greens straight out of here. I usually always mix them with something else. And the key to making something look natural is adding a little bit of red or a little bit of brown to it. Or something like this color. You can't see that, or it looks like weird right now, but this color is called yellow ochre. It's a yellow that has some brown in it. It's very natural and beautiful. And this, adding this to your green, so if I add this to this, it's gonna make it look really beautiful and natural. So I'll talk about that later when when we go over greenery. But I'm gonna take this green color and I'm gonna start making some really thin branches. I just do this using the tip of my little brush. Sometimes they'll turn out thicker than you want, and that's okay. It just takes practice. It's hard to make thin, it really is hard to make thin, like stalks. So don't beat yourself up if yours is a little too thick for your liking. I'm gonna attach these all to each other. So it's gonna go in there like this. And then I'm gonna come and add some leaves, which we'll talk about later. I'm just gonna add a few so you can see. What that would look like with some leaves on. And we'll go over the leaves later on. But that's just so you can see what they look like. Okay, so those are those pretty little blossoms. You can do those in any color. You can do as many as you want. I just think they're really, really cute. Okay, I'm gonna get a fresh sheet of paper. Okay. All right, so the next flower that we are going to do is my version of a poppy. It's not directly a poppy. I should probably call it a 4-leaf flower. This is a very made up flower that I've come up with, and it's really pretty. It looks like this or this on an angle. So these are the two I'm talking about, and they're really pretty. They have like kind of a darker center. Again, you can do these with any color, so it doesn't have to be reds or pinks. It can be blues, it can be purples, it can be oranges, it can be yellows. You can see in this one I added some yellow to it when it was still wet, so it bled. So yeah, it's really pretty. So I'm going to go in with my slightly bigger brush, and I'm just going to do a pink. And I'm going to start by painting some really big petals. So how I paint big petals is start small, and then as I go out, I kind of push it down and create a wider flower, a wider petal. If you run out of paint, you can just grab some more. Something important is making sure there are gaps in your petals. That's going to add to the look of it all. If I do completely solid, I'll show you what that looks like. So if I leave my petals completely solid, in my personal opinion, it just doesn't have as much charm. So this is a 4-leaf petal without any gaps in the flowers. And this is what they look like when there's gaps. And I just think it looks much more natural and much more beautiful. So that's what I do. That's what I suggest doing if you like how that looks. If you prefer how that looks, then you can go ahead and make your petals completely colored in. But I personally like to leave some gaps in my flowers. These flowers I always do bigger, on a bigger scale, which you can tell because I'm using my bigger brush. I kind of use a lot of water, and then once I have the basic flowers mapped out, I come in and drop in a bunch more of that darker color. What are you using? I also like to create some lines in between the flowers so it doesn't look like so separate like that. So I like to come in and kind of fill in those gaps a little bit. So yeah, now I'm gonna let that dry. And while that's drying, I'm gonna show you the version I do of it that is on an angle. So this guy, where is he? I don't know if you can see him very well. He's really, really pretty. I do this one even a lot more than this one. So I'm gonna go in with a yellow this time. Okay, so we are pretending we're seeing the flower on an angle. So that naturally means we're not going to see all of the petals. So what we're going to do is paint 3 very similar petals to these, 3 petals with gaps in it, with white gaps in them. We're going to do one facing this way, one facing this way, and one pointing up. So those are our petals, and now we're going to take a pinky red, and drop it in here. And as we let that just do its work, it's going to bleed into the yellow really pretty over time. I'm going to come in and add a bit more of this deep yellow that I love. I didn't feel like that yellow I initially put on was dark enough, so I'm coming in darkening up it a bit. And then once we add the stalks and the leaves to these will look beautiful. Now this is still wet, but I'm going to come in with dark brown with my little brush. And it's still wet, but I don't mind a bit of bleeding because we can come back over once it's done bleeding and make it darker. And I'm just going to drop the color in there in like little dots. And then I'm going to leave it, and the brown is going to bleed and turn really, really, really pretty. You can drop some in here. If you like how that looks, but again, not necessary. Everything I say is totally optional. Alright, so moving on, we are going to talk about anemones. Anemones are one of my favorite flowers of all time, and these are one of the ones that I do actually make a bit more accurate, scientific. I'm going to try and paint like a white flower, and so to do that, you can't obviously paint a true white flower or else it wouldn't show up on your paper. So I'm going to make it like a cream flower. So I'm going to do white mixed with like a teeny bit of brown, maybe a teeny bit of yellow. Make it a pretty cream color. And I'll show you what I do for an anemone. So I'm going to take this cream color, and I am going to make petals similar to this. So I'm going to do 5 of them. So this probably won't show up super well because it's cream, but we'll try. So I'm going to make 5 of these pretty cream petals. And I'm not going to do them super far away from each other. I want the petals to be pretty close together. I'll do another anemone in another color so you can see what that looks like, but you can see the petals are pretty close together. Again, they have gaps in them. I will also do a light blue one because we haven't done any blue flowers yet. So I'll do a light blue one. Okay, so I'm using the same technique I just did for those other flowers, or for the other anemone. These petals kind of have like a little like rounded, kind of like a little square at the edge. They're a little rounded but also a little square. So I'm gonna come around like here, and you can see, yeah, when I'm doing the petals, they're really messy. They don't have to be perfect. And that's gonna overlap with my cream flower, which is totally okay. And I like to make these flowers pretty close together. Okay. So right now they look really messy, which is totally okay. Something I've learned in painting is that it's gonna look really messy and weird before it looks cute, but it usually turns out pretty good. Okay, so now with a black / dark blue, like a really dark blue, basically black, I'm gonna go into the middle of this anemone, and I'm gonna paint a big black circle like this. And then around that flower head, I'm gonna do a bunch of little marks. My paint is a little too wet, so I'm gonna brush off a little bit of that water. I'm gonna do a bunch of little marks all around the outside of that. Anemones have this cool, they have like a flower head, and then coming around the flower head, they have like lots of little like kind of seed thingies. So I'm gonna add a bunch of those. Ooh, look how pretty. I don't know if you can see that very well. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Okay. So now I'm gonna do that. Okay, I'm just getting more of this black color. And I'll create a black center. And then around it, do a bunch of these little strokes. And some of them are going to bleed and stuff, but that's all part of what I love. So this one's bleeding real bad. So if you hate that, how it looks, you can wait a second and clean off your brush and come in with clean water. And just pick up that pigment like this. And it'll pick up right in your brush, so it should be fine. And then you can kind of go over that again and fix it. So yeah, I picked that up, so it looks better now, which I'm happy with. Okay, so our last flower we're gonna do is a flower I've made up called a flower bush thing. Doesn't really have a name. I call it a flower bush, which is kind of a weird name, but we'll go with it. A flower bush. These are another great filler. I use these a lot in wedding invitations, or if I'm feeling like there's like a strange gap somewhere. So these are super duper 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 easy. Basically, I start at the top. I'm using my little brush again. I start at the top, and as I go down, this is all like in one brush stroke. It's very similar to the lavender, but it's a lot more blobby. So I kind of just create like a big blob. I leave like a few gaps in it. This kind of looks like a pine cone on its own, but when you add leaves around it, it will look really pretty. So yeah, that's what I call a flower bush, because it kind of looks like a hedge or like a bush thing, but it's supposed to be a flower. And something about flowers I've learned is that they do look real weird on their own. my flowers anyway. The flowers I paint do tend to look really weird on their own. They don't always look like flowers, and then suddenly I add leaves to them and they look amazing. So that is one of the tricks of the trade. So I'm coming in and just dropping in more red to this purple. And they really do look like pine cones right now. I'm gonna add a few leaves to show you what they can look like and how cute they can be. Okay. So if this is in like a wreath I'm painting. Yeah. Anyways, you get the picture. The more context you add to it, the cuter it's gonna look. So, yes. Okay, so those are the flowers that we are going to be using. So, we have 8 of these flowers. So first we have the rose, then the daisies, the foxglove lavender, the blossoms, and then the peonies. So yeah, I can't wait to see you guys do these. I can't wait to see what your favorites are. I can't wait to see your own versions of them. I'm sure they're going to be beautiful, and I can't wait to see what you come up with. And then over here we have the anemones, the poppies, 4-leaf flower. And while I'm here with that poppy, I am going to come in and add, you can see how this dried. It really spread out and it really diffused. It's really pretty. I'm going to come in and add a few more strokes to make them a bit more defined. Example of what paint looks like fresh out of the palette when it comes to greens. Greens, manufactured greens, are very easy to spot. They look very fake. So this is the light green that's coming straight out of my palette. The dark green. That one doesn't look too bad actually, but I think it's because I have some extra paint left over in there. But that's actually a pretty nice green. This one is very fake. Oof. That is bad. Do you see how like unnatural that looks? This one is truly horrendous. And then there's this guy, the last one I have. He's pretty, but still a little bright. Like there's not a ton of foliage is that bright on its own. Some of it is, but. So generally how I make greens is I don't use this one a ton. It's hard to make him look natural. I don't use this one a ton either. I use mostly these two and I add yellows. This yellow ochre color or a little bit of brown to them, and then I add more yellow and that makes them lighter and more natural looking. So that's what we're gonna do. When it comes to greenery, you pretty much just need to learn how to paint 1 or 2 different kinds of leaves. And once you learn that, you're totally fine. So I'm gonna show you what I mix with this color to make it look a bit more natural. So on my palette, I'm taking this color and I'm mixing it with that green, and it's gonna create this really, really pretty, like almost olive, like really natural color. And I don't know if you can see that very well. I don't know if it translates very well, but to me, I just think that's so beautiful and looks so much more natural and like real. So that's probably my most used combination. A lot of the times, if I paint a leaf, like just this green color, I'll come back in afterwards and add a drop of that color, just to add contrast. into the leaf. And because those colors are still wet, they're going to do really pretty things. You see how they're bleeding into each other? So I'll show you how to paint a basic leaf. The most important thing with greenery, so let's do a couple notes here. The most important thing, first of all, is colors. You want natural. So the best way to do that, I'm assuming most of you guys probably do not have this color in your palette. So what you can add instead is a tiny bit of brown or red. Red and green together make brown. So if you add either of those, it will help make it look natural. You can also add some yellow, and that will help. Number 2 is playing around with scale. So I would say this is really, really important because there's not that many different kinds of actual leaves I do, different leaf shapes. Most of them are pretty much the same, but what I play around with is small, big, tiny, in groups, separate. I just play around with tons of different scales. So I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so I'm gonna go in with this one. Sometimes I like to do big leaves like these. Sometimes I like to do kind of medium-sized leaves like these. These are also medium-sized, but they're rounded. So I'll show you those. These are also big leaves. Over here, we have some smaller leaves. So these are round leaves, kind of more like eucalyptus leaves. And these are pointy leaves, but they're smaller. And then over here, we have some really thin pointy leaves that are really pretty. So my leaves themselves aren't that different, but the scale I use is really important. So I'm going to do a couple really big leaves. So how I start every leaf is by a big swooping motion. If I'm doing a big leaf, that's how I start it. I start with a big swooping motion like this, and then I come back on the other side and connect it, just like that. Then I come in and I fill it in. A lot of the times I leave white gaps in my leaves as well because I love how that looks. I think it's really beautiful. I'll come in and drop some darker color in part of the leaf, and then I'll come in with a yellow or another color and drop that in there just to make it have some more contrast. If you do choose to fill in the whole leaf, it can still be very interesting. I just tend to leave gaps in all my leaves. You can see. You can see all my leaves have gaps in them. That's just how I do it. I just think it looks beautiful. This one doesn't, which is totally fine. Some of these don't either. If you aren't leaving gaps, I would suggest coming in and dropping some other colors in there to make it look more interesting. I always drop them in super random places and kind of let the watercolors do their thing. They really thrive when they are just in water and they're like let to roam free. So I just dropped some blue in there and I dropped some yellow in there, and you can see it's starting to do cool things already. So yeah, I love just making my paints pretty wet and doing like a lot of techniques where I drop random colors into the leaf and seeing what happens. So here I just dropped in super dark because I wanted to see what that looked like. Okay, now if I want to connect these, say if I want to connect them, I could do another one coming here. So I always go, when I'm doing big leaves, I always go around and then I connect it on the other side. So around and connect it. Sometimes I like to make my leaves really blue, like this one. If you like this, you just need to add blue to your green instead of yellow. And it's really pretty. I love leaves that are that color. I also do that a lot. I add a lot of blue tones to my leaves. Okay. So now let's talk about smaller leaves. You can see in that smaller leaf I just did, I basically did it in one motion. So instead of going like this and then coming around on the other side, I went like this, pushed down, and then came back up. So when I was doing these bigger leaves, I could use my bigger brush. But when I'm doing smaller leaves, I really want to use my smaller brush because the brush is basically going to be the size of your leaf. So I'm going to start, I'll make this a bit darker so you can see better. I start skinny, push down to make the belly of the leaf, and then come back up. And then I come in. I always come in and drop some fun colors in there. And if I want to make this more round, I'll come around and fix that with my brush. So when you do the first initial brush stroke for a small leaf, it's okay if it's not perfect because you can come back in and fix the shape of the leaf. So, okay, I'm gonna add some brown to my leaves so you can see what it would look like for you guys who don't necessarily have that color. So I added a little bit of brown and yellow to this, and it makes the exact same color that I've been using. It's beautiful. Look at that. It's really pretty. Okay, so yeah, adding that brown is really, really going to make a difference for your greenery, I promise. Okay, so I'm going to do some smaller greenery coming up the side here. A lot of the times when I'm making really delicate greenery, I start with a thin branch, kind of like how we did for the lavender. If you have a smaller brush on you than that one, like this one's really thin. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, it's really thin. You can come in and do your branch with that if you prefer, because it's gonna make a nice thin branch. But I'm making this work. That's totally fine if it's a little bit thicker. Okay, so I'm gonna make some some rounded leaves for this branch. So these are slightly different than these ones. How I want to do that is mostly for my circular leaves, I start at the top and create a circle, and I don't fill it in all the way. And you're going to want them to be smaller up here and bigger down here at the bottom. So down here at the bottom, I start kind of like how I did with these leaves, and then I just kind of round off at the top. And these are really light, so I'm going to get some more green and add it in because they're so light. So yeah, greenery is super fun. You can play around with different shades of green, different colors, and it's a blast. So you can see here, I just kind of make, I do this like weird motion with my brush where I almost create like a circle, and then I have it coming down, and then I point it down. There's not always going to be gaps, like this one doesn't have a gap, but the reason I leave gaps in the leaves is because I just find it more visually interesting. So how I make up for that if my leaf doesn't have gaps in it is just by adding different colors to that leaf. And I find that that really helps. Okay, so you can see as I go down, I'm making them bigger and bigger. So when you guys are doing this at home, I want you to make space and to practice each flower, and then I also want you to make a page dedicated to greenery and just really fill it out and really fill out your pages with your flowers on them as well. And then when you feel confident in your flowers as well as your greenery, you can kind of come up with your own composition and start making your own bouquets, start making your own wreaths. You can paint wreaths, and then in the middle of those wreaths, write your favorite quote, your favorite song lyric. Florals are so awesome because they're really, really versatile. They can be used for anything. So they look good anywhere, pretty much. No one's ever going to be like, why are there florals there? That doesn't go there. Like, they're beautiful, and they work for pretty much anything. So those are some rounded leaves. You can see how these are bleeding. They're really pretty. These are some of the other leaves close up. You see how adding different colors adds so much to that leaf? It could have been just like a boring one, but it is so beautiful. Okay. So now let's do some really skinny kind of blue leaves. Okay. So similar technique in that we are doing the same kind of motion that we use for these, but we're making it longer. So I'm going to do a couple just so you can see. So I'm drawing a stalk here. And then to make these leaves, what I do is I start really skinny, but I don't push down as hard. So when I was doing these, to make those leaves, I pushed all the way down on my brush to give it like a really fat belly on the leaf. But for these, the thinner your leaf, if you want thin leaves, you don't want to push down very hard on the brush. So you can see I'm just pushing down a little bit so it gets a little thicker in the belly, and then lift back up. Then you can also do it from top to bottom. So I'm going to start skinny up here, push down a little bit, and then release the pressure at the bottom. So yeah, if you're doing thin leaves, you just want to make sure you don't put very much pressure on your brush. And these ones generally don't really have gaps in them when I do them because they're so thin, there's not really room for gaps. But you can still add other colors to them. So say if I want to put a little yellow in here, you can come in and drop in some yellow. I love dropping in color. I think it's so fun. So yeah, I'll do a bigger version of that because you can do that on a bigger scale with the bigger brush. So come in and push down and then come up. These ones are going to be thicker because this brush is thicker. And because they're thicker, I'm actually going to put some white gaps in these. So I'm going to come around the opposite side and put some white gaps in them, like this. I like that a lot more than what I had originally. But isn't this color pretty? I love this color. It's like a dark foresty green blue color. For leaves, personally, I feel like they just take some practice. Once you get them down, though, they're super easy. Once you figure out how your brushes work and what works for those, then they're easy peasy. Okay. All of these ones I've done are quite dark greens, so I'm going to show you what it looks like with some white added to the greens. Sometimes I like to do like some flowy leaves, just like coming out of a wreath or a bouquet or whatever I'm doing. So to do those, I'll kind of make them a bit more swoopy like this. And I'll kind of just let my, follow where my brush goes. So it kind of goes up and then down, like an S, kind of. So sometimes I like to have those coming out of bouquets or wherever. You can add more colors to those as well. Yeah, the most important thing for greenery is really to just play around with your brushes, see what feels best to you. I'm honestly always making up new leaves, so it's kind of just a work in progress, playing around, having fun with it. I also sometimes do these kind of eucalyptus leaves. They're kind of shaped like a heart, almost. So when I'm doing these, I'll draw them out first, and then I'll fill them mostly in, but still leave some gaps, because I always leave gaps. So yeah, this is another kind of leaf. I don't do these as much. I don't make them all like a heart. I make some of them just circular, like that. But those are really popular. A lot of people love eucalyptus, so those are fun. pretty. Oof, that didn't turn out so well. Okay, so those are some eucalyptus. And then you can come in and add color as per usual. Okay, so let me show you up close what that color does. So this is the smaller, skinnier one. You can see I just didn't push down as hard. You can see the difference. On this leaf, I pushed my brush all the way down so the belly is bigger, but on these ones it's smaller. And some made up leaves. And this is what the color, how the colors are bleeding in the eucalyptus leaves. Look how pretty. So yeah. So now that we've learned some leaves, I'm going to come in around the flowers we were practicing and add some. On your practice sheets is a great place to practice your greenery, and you can come in around your flowers and practice like what kind of leaves you like to do with certain flowers, etc., etc. Okay. So you can see here, you know what this technique is now. It's me coming around, pushing down, and then coming around on the other side. So if your leaves are big, or if your leaves are big, or if you're using a smaller brush, you will probably need to do that technique where you go around on one side and then meet that same leaf on the other side. If your brush is big enough, you may not have to do that. Like, let me do one leaf with this brush. With this big brush. Yeah, if I use my big brush, I can just do it in one swoop. But I kind of like using my little brush. I don't know why. I painted over the rose there, but that's okay. I'm just having fun filling in and seeing what I like, and I'll make up some leaves here. So yeah, when you guys are done with your greenery, playing around, you might still be practicing your greenery, but afterwards, if you want, you can come and practice your greenery around your flowers. See what you like, see what you don't like. I'm gonna do some stalks coming out of here. And then I'm gonna attach some really long petals to this. I mean long leaves, not petals. So I would suggest playing around with how hard you push your brush down. I would play around with going front to back of the leaf as well as back to front. I would practice dropping different colors into the leaves. I'd practice playing with scale, so like maybe I want to put a really big leaf in here and seeing like how that affects your composition. I'll just play around with all those sorts of things. And when you're done like playing around and seeing how you like to paint your leaves, how you like to paint your flowers, I want to see all the things you've been working on. Okay, I'm gonna do another leaf coming out of here because I feel like it looks like it's missing something. Let's see, let's flip to this other page. Okay, let's do some petal or leaves around the anemones. I like can't talk today. It's bad. Okay. So sometimes I like to take the leaf right up like it's underneath the flower. because I know where the edge of my petal on the flower is. So sometimes I like to pretend that leaf is like right under the flower and take it underneath the petals to really make it feel like it's part of it. It's part of the painting. Something that would be good practice is painting maybe some flowers on greeting cards. For people, so you can get some nice practice. In my opinion, you can't go wrong with flowers. So you can see I'm pushing down and then coming around on the other side. Okay, so here's the flower bush I talked about. Here's a rose, and these are some leaves, and you can see what I mean about playing around with scale. So in this painting, I had several really big leaves, and then I had a bunch of little tiny leaves. Okay, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you had so much fun. I had a blast talking to you guys all about the things that I don't always get to talk a lot about. I don't get to teach a ton of people about painting. So whenever you're done with your practice sheets, first of all, I want you to fill these practice sheets. Practice your roses, your daisies, your peonies, your blossoms. The more you practice, the more you're going to find your own style, and you're going to really figure out, oh, that's how I do it. I love that. I love these brush strokes. I like leaving more gaps in my petals, or I don't like leaving as many gaps as she did, which is totally fine. So as soon as you've filled in your practice sheets, I really want to see. I love seeing other people's paintings, and I would love to give you some pointers. I'd love to look at them and tell you what I think, because I'm pretty sure everybody is their own worst critic, and when I look at them, I know I'm going to be amazed. Also, I really want you to fill out your whole greenery sheet. So I filled out some of it, but I just want you to really explore different sizes, different colors. Remember this is really important. You can see it really good here. See how fake this color is, and this one kind of? So focus more on these natural colors. Mix some blues, some yellows, some browns with your greens, and they'll turn out beautiful. You can expect, after you're done watching this, a follow-up video or a follow-up email with the links to my favorite paper, my favorite practice sketchbook that is like lower quality paper, but it's super cheap. I'll send you that. And I'll send you some brushes I love and some recommendations for paint if you run out and you need some more. So yeah, thank you so much for joining me. I'll be having a couple more workshops where we work on a specific painting, like a wreath or a bouquet, stuff like that. So keep your eye out for those. Now that you've taken my basic class, that one will be really great for you. So make sure you practice in between and kind of really figure out what you like to paint, what colors you love, what your kind of personal style is, and then we can paint together again soon. Have a great day.